We have to raise the question honestly whether weapon deliveries have made any sense. And obviously, they have made no sense. I do hope that those who are still thinking about delivering more weapons to Ukraine will consider this impact and this consequence as well. If Western weapons will be allowed to be targeted at strategic depth for Russia, that would cause a serious risk of escalation for sure. Your Excellencies, dear colleagues, unfortunately I have to start by saying that we are living in the age of dangers. And 34 years ago, when we got rid of our communist oppressors and we shifted from a one-party dictatorship to parliamentary democracy, and we shifted from a planned communist economy to market economy, or 25 years ago when we joined NATO, or 21 years ago when we joined the European Union, we would not have thought that we will be faced once again with the phantom of Cold War. And similarly, a couple of years ago, we would not have thought that war would return to Europe. And dear colleagues, Your Excellencies, nowadays this is the reality. We are faced with the phantom of the Cold War, and war returned to Europe. I'm representing Hungary, a country which is a neighboring country to Ukraine. That means that for the last 2.5 years, we have been living in the shadow of a war. 2.5 years, almost 1,000 days. And we have been confronted with the consequences. 1.3 million refugees. Even nowadays, there are several hundreds of schools and kindergartens in Hungary which enroll the children of the refugee families. And we have been paying a price of a war which is not our war, and for the outbreak of which we do not bear any kind of responsibility. So I do believe that almost after 1,000 days, the real question is not what we do think about the war, but the real question is how peace could be made. Or even more precisely, Mr. President, the question is, which is the fastest way to peace? Because we have to pick that one, the fastest one. Because the later peace will be reached, the more people will die, the more destruction will take place, and more families will be torn apart. And we Hungarians don't want more destruction. We don't want more families to be torn apart. We don't want to see more videos about violent conscription. We don't want more people to die. Especially putting into consideration the 150,000 Hungarians living in Ukraine, a community members of which have been mobilized to the Ukrainian army. Many of them have been deployed to the front line, and unfortunately, many of them have died already. And I think that after almost 1,000 days, this is high time to make an honest stock-taking and to analyze what has worked out and what has not worked out, what the international community or Europe has made as a reaction to the war. And if we are honest to ourselves, we have to say that practically nothing has worked out what international community and Europe has done as a reaction to this war. Nothing has worked out what was based on an assumption that there might be a solution at the battlefield. We have to raise the question honestly whether weapon deliveries have made any sense. And obviously, they have made no sense. No sense because weapon deliveries have not changed the situation at the battlefield, and they have not brought us closer to peace either. Weapon deliveries have only increased the volume of weapons on both sides of the front line, causing more casualties and causing the prolongation of the war. And I do hope that those who are still thinking about delivering more weapons to Ukraine will consider this impact and this consequence as well. And similarly, I hope that those who are supposed to make decisions whether the weapons delivered from the West would be allowed to be used against strategic depth in Russia will make a responsible decision. Because if Western weapons will be allowed to be targeted at strategic depth for Russia, that would cause a serious risk of escalation for sure. And I do believe that in case of such a crisis situation, we really have to put into consideration the weight, the significance of words. Because in such situation, words do have a much more serious significance than in peace times. And we are seriously concerned in Hungary about the open and shameless reference of possible use of nuclear weapons. So, dear colleagues, basically nothing has worked out of those measures which have been based on the assumption that there might be a battlefield solution. That means that solution must be looked after somewhere else. And if you raise the question, where should we look for this solution, then the answer is around the negotiating table. Therefore, Hungary argues in favor of an immediate ceasefire and the start of peace talks. This would be the fastest way to peace. And with this, with starting peace talks, many lives will be saved. I know it's easy to say, but very complicated to implement. Why? Because international liberal mainstream made peace as a cuss word. And whoever argues in favor of peace will be immediately attacked and stigmatized. And it's a huge mistake as well that diplomacy is now being given a diverted definition. Many would like us to believe that diplomacy is only about talking to those with whom you agree 100%. This is not diplomacy, this is something else. This is not an achievement. Diplomacy is a capacity to talk to those with whom you might not agree, to talk to those with whom you might disagree in everything. And here I do believe, Mr. President, that the United Nations should have a great role, because United Nations was not established as a group of like-minded countries. It was established to give platform for everyone to talk to everyone about everything. And UN gives a legitimate possibility even for those countries who are at war with each other to talk to each other. Therefore, we reject any kind of federalistic efforts which would limit or restrict us in whom we would like to talk in the framework of United Nations and what would be the topic.